Welcome back to the Sober Web, my friends. I'm Clark, the host and creator, and today we're going to talk about how to stop drinking alcohol or overcome an addiction without all the BS of shame and guilt. These two things can feed the cycle of addiction for so long, and they can even make it hard to get out of the addiction. And none of it really makes sense. So if you are trying to figure out how to stop drinking alcohol, or you're even overcoming an addiction of any sort, this video is for you because I'm going to debunk the BS behind guilt and shame, what it's all about, where it comes from, and what you can do about it. But before we get into that, hit the like button if you're sober and leave your sober date in the comments below. Now let's get into the topic of how to stop drinking alcohol by cutting through all the BS of shame and guilt. What do we actually feel bad about? Because that's what guilt is. Guilt is us feeling bad about doing something wrong. But are we doing anything wrong because we're an addict, or we have an addiction, or we have problems, or we have struggles? The simplest answer is no, we should not feel bad about it because ultimately it's not our fault. Do we have to take ownership of mistakes and bad choices made in the throes of addiction? Do we have to make amends to hopefully find forgiveness within ourselves or from others in order to heal and recover fully? Yes, absolutely. But ultimately, no one should be made to feel bad because they have a struggle with something like alcohol or a substance or even something that's a mental or emotional addiction. And even more important than that, we shouldn't make ourselves feel bad about it, but there's so much stigma around it all, it's hard not to feel bad about it. Hit the like button if that makes any sense. And then there's shame, which is really just a fancier way of saying embarrassment. We want to hide from the opinions of others. We don't want to be judged. Maybe we did something wrong. Maybe it wasn't anything wrong actually at all, but we are feeling this sense of shame because we've been told that we must feel shame about something. But really, shame, it comes down to being a fear. It's a fear of opinions, maybe my own opinion about myself, definitely fearing the opinions of others, fear of being judged, fear of letting people down, of being a disappointment. So if you know what shame feels like or what embarrassment feels like, which I'm sure we all do, hit that like button for me, okay? So that's shame and that's guilt for you. In terms of how they feed addiction, God forbid we have a problem, or we're an alcoholic, or we abuse a substance, or we're addicted to whatever it is, porn or sex or money or working. Who knows, because there's so many addictions out there, but somehow we are made to feel bad and embarrassed about a problem that we have. And when we're made to feel that way, whether it's us making ourselves feel that way or other people, the only way that we know how to cope with those feelings of regret and remorse and disappointment is to just cope with it in that unhealthy way that we've habitually fallen into. But then the problem begets itself because you wake up the next day or after you've given into the addiction, you're feeling bad and ashamed about the fact that you did it again. And so the whole cycle just repeats itself over and over and over until we finally say, enough, you know what? Cut the BS, I'm done with this. And unfortunately, there's just no getting away from guilt and shame, both in addiction and out of addiction, until you choose to not let it affect you. We've already talked about how guilt and shame works in addiction. But outside of addiction, in recovery, sadly, there's also a stigma around having the problem. So people that don't understand what you're trying to do, they might make you feel bad about quitting alcohol. They might make you ashamed about it because they might just downright shame you. And ultimately, that's on them. That has nothing to do with you. So you've got to learn not to take it personal when they project that stuff onto you. And then even in the recovery world, in certain support groups, you might be shamed or made to feel bad about your path of recovery, or choosing to use words like recovered alcoholic, or maybe a different path that some people don't agree with. And then of course, the toughest place that guilt and shame come from is within yourself. Because somewhere along the line of your life, you've been led to believe that there's something wrong with you, that you're not worthy, that you don't deserve to be happy, or that you're always going to mess up, or you're always going to be a disappointment. So you've chosen to believe these agreements that were made for you, and thus tell yourself over and over, there's something wrong with me. I have something I have to feel bad about. There's something that I need to be embarrassed about, when in fact, you don't. But the only way to cut through the BS of guilt and shame is that you have to choose to let it go. And the first way to do that, to begin that journey, is to just have acceptance of who you are and where you're at in life and what your past was. Just because you struggle with an addiction, there's nothing inherently wrong with you. And if you can just accept that simple idea that there's nothing wrong with me, you can begin to release the shame and guilt around it all. You get to start breaking that stigma within your own mind and within your own heart. Now, the next step when figuring out how to stop drinking alcohol or overcome addiction is you've got to have some self-compassion. And I know that this is a really, really tough one because half the reason that any of us fall into the trap of addiction or alcoholism or whatever it is because we don't love ourselves. We don't think that we deserve to be loved. We don't feel that there's anything about us that someone might love or that we can even love about ourselves. But have some grace and compassion for yourself, my friends. You're only human. You are a work in progress. And instead of focusing on the negatives, the failures, focus on the wins. Focus on the positive steps that you have made despite the addiction and the struggles. Have some love for yourself and be kind to yourselves. And since a lot of guilt and shame has to do with us living in the past, because we get stuck in this rut or this feeling of spinning our wheels and going nowhere, you have to embrace your past. You have to love your past. You have to accept it. And most importantly, you have to learn from it. There's no real reason right here, right now, in this moment, that we should feel bad or embarrassed for something that happened yesterday, or a year ago, or 5 years ago. It was a mistake. It doesn't matter how it happened. It doesn't matter the story behind why it happened. Whatever it might be, just learn from it. Be open to learning and adapting, because that's ultimately what can break guilt and shame's hold on you and the rest of your life. And then finally, because guilt and shame have a lot to do with us fearing people's opinions, I'm gonna highly suggest that you stop caring about people's BS. Guilt and shame can be projected onto us. People in recovery, people outside of recovery, people that understand it, people that don't understand it, they will project onto you their own stuff if they have not done the work around it all. So you've got to work on not being afraid of people's opinions. Because as much as we want to believe that no one has any control over us, the fear of opinions and what people might think of us or might not think of us is a huge hindrance in addiction, out of addiction, and in recovery, and outside of recovery. No one gets to dictate your journey. No one gets to make you feel bad or ashamed about how you choose to recover. No one even gets to make you feel bad about having a problem. That's on them. That has nothing to do with you, my friends. So there you have it. I hope that these tips help you start cutting through the BS of guilt and shame if you're figuring out how to stop drinking alcohol or you are trying to overcome addiction. It doesn't matter if you're in addiction, out of addiction. It doesn't even matter actually if you even struggle with anything per se, because guilt and shame is in all of our lives. In one way or another, we all struggle with something that we feel bad about or that we feel embarrassed about that ties us to a past that we cannot let go because maybe we don't believe that we deserve to live free of that burden of guilt and shame in the past. But in terms of addiction, in terms of recovery, learning how to forgive the past and release that guilt and shame is one of the most powerful things that you can do to help you fully become recovered from your addiction. Hit the like button if this video spoke to you. Please leave your sober date in the comments below. And I really hope that you'll share this video if it spoke to you and you think it will offer value to someone else. And I really hope that you'll consider subscribing to my channel, because with every like, share, comment, and subscribe, the algorithm gods will send this out to the people that need it most. And by doing all of that, that's how you support not only this channel, but you also support others in addiction recovery. Until I see you again, be sure to check out the video right over there. But much love, much life. I'm Clark with the Sober Webb, and I'll talk to you really soon. Bye.